So today I'm going to be talking to you about a lost art. It's something which isn't really talked about that much, and when it is, it's talked about in a very kind of rudimentary, fundamental way, and not in a good way, not in the way that basics are good, more so in a way where it's misunderstood, right? And that art is about reinventing yourself. How is it that you go from a place where you don't want to be? How do you go from that to a place that you want to go? First of all, my name's Aaron. I run this channel. It's focused mainly on a mix between shadow work and conscious coaching. Okay, and when I say conscious coaching, it's more of the kind of traditional kind of coaching. So you have the unconscious and the conscious mind. But enough about that. What are we going to talk about right now? We're going to talk about the process, deconditioning, but then there's also the process of reconditioning. So one of my mentors, James Tripp, who was a very famous hypnotherapist in the UK scene, and hypnotist in the UK scene, talks about this idea of how to create change in somebody, how to move somebody from A to B through a process which is easy, but also easy for the person to understand, so not just me, right? Which is why I'm saying it to you. So the first one is you kind of want to feel like you are building a house, right? That's the analogy that we're using right now, which is the deconditioning and reconditioning, right? The problem is, unless you're a baby and you're watching this, in which case, I don't really know what to say to you, but unless you're that, you already have a house. You already are a person. You already have beliefs. You already have things that you're conditioned to believe in or conditioned to think. You already have things which you don't want to see, right? Shadows. You have all of this kind of stuff, a house, some of it which is functional and some of it which is not. But when you're talking about reinventing yourself, it means that there is so much stuff which you don't like that you just are like, whatever, even if I get rid of some of the old stuff which might have been good, that's still preferable to start from square zero in order to move into the direction that I want to go. So you already have a house. Now, depending on who you are watching this, you can imagine that in so many different ways. Maybe it's just a little thing, like one area you want to reinvent, or maybe there's multiple areas, maybe it's the whole thing. But first of all, what you have to do is you have to see what is it that you don't like. You have to be very clear on that, because that's the thing that we're going to be removing, we're going to be taking out. And it's a lost art because people either go 0 to 100, either you take everything or you don't take anything. And also there's not a lot of resources about actually finding out what is the good stuff and what is the bad stuff. So you have this metaphorical house. Where do you start first? You start at the foundations. What are the foundations? Foundations are beliefs, okay? And the ways of thinking. There's a lot more to that, but right now the thing that's most important to focus on for you is those beliefs. So how do you find these beliefs? These beliefs are something which I can point you in a direction to this other resource that I have created, which is my shadow work playlist for free. I recommend you go and look at that because they come in 3 different categories. There's introjections, there's projections, and then there's split ego states or parts. Now, you have to identify which are the main kind of driving forces for you right now that are pushing you in a direction that you don't like. As you get more mature, as you go through stages of development, which we can talk about in another video, but this isn't the video for that, but you can think of it as levels of maturity. As you move through these stages, there will be different parts which come up for you. So we don't actually have to think too long term, we have to think immediately right now. What are the areas which cause the most friction for me right now? So we're not even coming up with a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, because we cannot predict where we're going to be at that point, especially if you're on the path properly and you're growing in a way which is exponential. So we find out what are the storylines, beliefs, narratives, you can call it whatever you want, which are most holding me back right now. So for example, I'm working with this client who had a lot of issues around getting approval from their mother, okay? Whether it came to dating, whether it came to business, whether it came to whatever. Now, a lot of that stuff is addressed. There is more kind of subtle themes that we are working on right now, like feeling a little bit lost now that his business is stable, now that his relationships are stable, now that he can actually own his space a little bit more with a mentor, okay? Another mentor. The reason why I'm telling you this is because problems change as you progress. So you have to look into the immediate moment right now. What is bothering me the most? I would say don't identify more than 3. Okay, 3 is a relatively arbitrary number. I would actually say 2 is probably more accurate, but 3 is the absolute cap. Because if you start working on more than that, it'll just be too many tabs to keep open, too many open loops, basically, that you'll just either lose focus, lose concentration, or just lose willpower because you'll be putting out so many different fires, right? So you come up with the top 3. Then you have to classify them on what kind of shadows they are, what kind of constricting beliefs they are. So we'll do a little bit a bullet point kind of thing right now, but I do recommend you watching that playlist. that I'm going to link in the description below. Introjections are when there is an outside force which feels like it's pushing on us, right? So our internal reality is something where we feel small, weak, or vulnerable. Introjections are something that we've taken from an external stimulus, and we have internalized that. So let's say we had like a talent show and our mom or our father's like, oh, that's okay, but didn't really pay attention to us. We could get an introject from that, external, it's something that happened to us, that we are not important enough to receive praise or receive love, right? It can also go in a different way. A projection usually sits on top of an introjection. Usually, not always, but most of the time. And it's whenever we are projecting, so we are pushing our own internal onto something external. So road rage, everyone knows what that looks like, whether they experienced it themselves or whether they have experienced it through a family member. People are like shouting like, oh, he cut me off, he's doing this on purpose, they're implying all of this stuff which they can't actually know, right? Because they're not in that person's mind. It's a projection. That's one version of a projection, is when people get angry. That's the internal message, which you can just use as a cue. Oh, I'm getting angry, I'm getting frustrated. When really, maybe they're getting angry because they cut someone off earlier. Or if they were to cut somebody off, that would mean that they are trying to slight them, because that's what they would do, you see? It's your own world being projected onto somebody else. This is complex, a bit like introjections, they're also complex, right? So it can be a shadow projection where you see something which you lack. Let's say you lack empathy when you're driving on the road. You don't like that about yourself, so you are pushing that onto somebody else, right? When somebody cuts you off, oh, he doesn't have empathy, or she isn't compassionate, she isn't letting me do this. But there's also something called a golden projection. This is a quality that we admire, that we can't see in ourselves. So let's say we see someone that's really confident, right? Whether it's at a bar, or they're just walking on the street, or maybe it's our boss, or maybe it's a co-worker, whatever, they're just confident. We can be like, wow, that person's so confident. And it creates like a halo effect around them. Meanwhile, we are idolizing them and making them into something which they are not. They are confident, yes, but we're also putting all of these meanings, because we feel like we lack that confidence. We are putting all of these extra meanings. Or if they're confident, it must mean they're a good person. It must mean that they're better than us. It must mean that this, must mean that they're with that, right? That's another version of a projection. There's two more versions, complementary and matching, but we will talk about that later, okay? Because right now it's kind of running a bit over time when it comes to that, right? But they're also in the playlist, which I'm going to link. Third one and most complex is split ego states, or parts work. So this is where systems like IFS, to some extent reparenting, all that kind of stuff comes into. And it's the most complex because these parts can also grow up with us, which means there could be a part of us which is sabotaging us, which is just as mature and intelligent as us. Not always about the inner child. So this is something where we have to be careful and mindful and pay attention, right? It can also be a situation where when the going gets tough, another part of us comes out. Like I just had a call with a client today, and it's about his relationship, and there was a part of him which wanted to express sensuality and his love for his partner, right? But he felt like he couldn't really do that there was some kind of a block there. That was a part that we worked on. Wasn't an introjection, he didn't feel like he wasn't worthy of love. Wasn't a projection, he didn't put something onto his partner that he didn't own about himself. It was an ego state. So broadly, these are the three categories. And you identify the top three areas where there's friction. Business, work ethic, productivity, whatever. You identify which one it's coming from. And then, depending on which shadow it is, you either release it, which is introjection. Projection is you re-own it. And then split ego state is you integrate it. Again, there's more information on that in the playlist that I linked below. This is just an overview, like a big picture overview kind of guidance about how to change and reinvent yourself. So we got the belief stuff out of the way, we got the shadow work out of the way, we got all of that unconscious stuff out of the way, right? Now, there is a clean slate here, okay? Which is when the second part of the building, the house analogy starts, which is we've taken out everything that doesn't work, the electricity, the plumbing, the foundations, and now we have to replace them with something, okay? This is done through a practice called embodiment. So when you get rid of beliefs, when you get rid of narratives, when you heal parts, right? You're not implanting something new instantaneously, okay? What does that mean? It means that there is a space that's left over. It's not like you go from, oh, I didn't feel like I'm enough and now I feel like I am enough. Whilst there is a certain kind of truth to that, because if you don't feel like you're not enough, then just by definition, you are enough now, right? But there's not necessarily like a narrative that comes with that. It's just an empty space which is very warm, okay? The embodiment practice is you fill that space through the practice itself. So the easiest way to do this is by doing something called a metta meditation, okay? So for those of you that don't know, I was also trained by a Buddhist nun. I lived with her for a couple of years in Poland and then in Budapest, Hungary, where she passed away, and we were looking after her in the hospice, okay? But during all of that time, she was teaching us the Dharma. And one of the main core practices that we did was metta meditation. Metta in Pali or Sanskrit means loving kindness. So it's a meditation which is a very feeling-based meditation. Now the way that they taught it or the way that Sister Kema, who's the name of my teacher, taught it was very different to how I'm going to teach it to you right now. It's the same mechanics but for different purposes, okay? For her it's about insight and waking up to reality, which is a separate practice. For this it's going to be about cleaning up your psychology in a much more therapeutic manner. So with metta meditation, there's 4 phrases that you need to go into, which is may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you be loved. These are the 4 principles. I didn't come up with this. This was obviously what Sister Kema taught me, and she was part of the greater, and she helped found the greater organization, which is the Dharma Sukha Foundation, which is in America right now, okay? TWIM, who practice TWIM, Tranquil Wisdom Insight Meditation. So you have these 4 phrases, you close your eyes and you just repeat those 4 phrases, right? And after a time, you will start to feel the feeling of metta in your chest, which is a very warm and loving feeling. Now with this feeling, you just stay there until it stabilizes, until you no longer have to use those phrases to generate this feeling. The feeling is just there. And with this feeling, this is the magic, you radiate that to this new space that's been created by removing the old beliefs, the old blocks, the old versions of the ego that were no longer useful. You didn't just remove them, but you also integrated them, depending on what kind of flavor of shadow they were. And this, over time, will help a new narrative spring out for you, which is both authentic to you, but also not forced, okay? Because the problem with like stuff like NLP and hypnotherapy is they are healing the mind from the mind level, right? Okay? It doesn't really work, because if something is created from the mind, it's also limited by the mind. When I say mind, I just mean this mental kind of sense that we are doing all the time. Thinking, we're always thinking, right? I don't mean it in terms of brain capacity. You can choose whatever you want, choose how woo-woo you want to go with it. But it's more to do with the fact that we're not trying to force a mental narrative into our mind. Because if we somehow say, oh, I'm replacing this belief that I'm not good enough with I am good enough, this is the problem. The fact that you even have to say I am good enough implies that you don't really believe it in a certain way. Now stay with me, because I'll break it down like this. For you to even say I am good enough means that there was a question that you weren't for you to say that, rather than you just are. You just is. I know that doesn't make grammatical sense, but it makes sense in this context, okay? Which is why the embodiment practice is the key to making lasting, deep, and personalized change. Now, I add a 3rd section as a bonus here for you, right? Because this is a kind of big picture talk about how my coaching system works and how, at least how the unconscious part of my coaching system works, and how we can utilize it for you in a way which makes sense with all of the free resources in this channel, right? If you want some more personalized stuff, I do have a one-on-one link below, which you can go click. We can just have a quick kind of chat. No hard sales, nothing like that, right? But like I said, the 3rd section, which is a bonus. This is super, super key. You do all of this with a playful attitude, okay? This is one of the areas where the same mentality that you take when going to the gym or going to a martial arts place is not going to work, right? This is not a forcing or a pushing practice. This is a very easy, a very fun practice. You are playing with the deeper aspects of yourself, the deeper aspects of your mind, of your consciousness, whatever you want to call it, right? You can call it whatever definition you need, right? And it's in that playfulness that there is space for something to be created, okay? Because it's in play that we learn the most. It's in play which we grow the most. So if you're having trouble with this, if you're following all of this stuff on the channel and something's not quite clicking, look at how serious you are taking it. We want to be sincere and not serious. That's a big picture overview of how to reinvent yourself and how the lost art of reinventing yourself can become known. If you enjoyed it, then that's great. If you have any questions, please put the comments below and I'll get back to you. And if it's a relevant comment, I'll even do a personalized video for you, right? Like I said, if you want some more personalized feedback one-on-one, we can book a one-on-one call If you're not ready for that, then you can just stick around on the channel. Okay? Bye.